Welcome to Midnight Murmurs. Tonight's story is The Listener, written by Algernon Blackwood and first published in 1907. Our tale follows a struggling writer who rents a quiet, inexpensive room in an aging London boarding house. At first, it seems like little more than a worn building tucked away from the noise of the city. But strange sounds begin to echo through the empty halls. The silence grows heavier. The house itself seems to watch, and something unseen lingers just beyond the edge of reason. So settle in, dim the lights, and let the darkness gather. This is The Listener. September 4. I have hunted all over London for rooms suited to my income of £120 a year, and have at last found them. There are 2 rooms. They are without modern conveniences, it is true, and they are located in an old, ramshackle building. But they are within a stone's throw of P Place, in an eminently respectable street. The rent is only £25 a year. I had begun to despair when, at last, I found them by chance. The circumstances were unworthy of record. I had to sign a lease for a year, and I did so willingly. The furniture from our old place in Shire, which has been stored for so long, will suit them perfectly. October 1. Here I am in my 2 rooms in the center of London, not far from the offices of the periodicals where I occasionally manage to sell an article or 2. The building stands at the end of a cul-de-sac. The alley is well paved and clean, lined chiefly with the backs of sedate, institutional-looking buildings. There is also a stable. My own house is dignified with the title of Chambers. I feel as though, one day, the honor must prove too much for it. It will swell with pride and fall apart. It is very old. The floor of my sitting room has valleys and low hills upon it, and the top of the door slants away from the ceiling with a glorious disregard for what is usual. They must have quarreled 50 years ago and have been moving apart ever since. October 2. My landlady is old and thin, with a faded, dusty face. She is uncommunicative. The few words she utters seem to cost her pain. Perhaps her lungs are half choked with dust. She keeps my rooms as free from this substance as possible, with the assistance of a strong girl who brings up my breakfast and lights the fire. As I have already said, the landlady is not communicative. In response to my pleasant efforts at conversation, she informed me briefly that I was the only occupant of the house at present. My rooms had not been occupied for several years. There had been other gentlemen upstairs, but they had left. She never looks directly at me when she speaks. Instead, she fixes her dim eyes upon the middle button of my waistcoat until I become nervous and begin to wonder whether it is crooked or perhaps the wrong sort of button altogether. October 8th. My weekly account book is neatly kept and, so far, reasonable. Milk and sugar, 7 pence. Bread, 6 pence. Butter, 8 pence. Marmalade, 6 pence. Eggs, 1 shilling and 8 pence. Laundress, 2 shillings and 9 pence. Oil, 6 pence. Attendance, 5 shillings. The total is 12 shillings and 2 pence. The landlady has a son who, she told me, is something on a omnibus. He occasionally comes to see her. I think he drinks, because he talks very loudly, regardless of the hour, and tumbles about over the furniture downstairs. All morning, I sit indoors writing. I write articles, verses for comic papers, and a novel I have been working on for 3 years, concerning which I still have dreams. I am also writing a children's book in which the imagination has free rein, and another book that is intended to last as long as I do. It is an honest record of my soul's advance or retreat in the struggle of life. Besides these, I keep a book of poems that I use as a safety valve, and concerning which I have no dreams whatsoever. Between them all, I am always occupied. In the afternoons, I generally try to take a walk for the sake of my health. I walked through Regent's Park, into Kensington Gardens, or farther afield to Hampstead Heath. October 10. Everything went wrong today. I have 2 eggs for breakfast. This morning, one of them was bad. I rang the bell for Emily. When she came in, I was reading the newspaper. Without looking up, I said, "The egg is bad." "Oh, is it, sir?" she replied. "I'll get another one." She went out, taking the egg with her. I waited for her return, which came 5 minutes later. She placed the new egg on the table and went away. But when I looked down, I saw that she had taken away the good egg and left the bad one, all green and yellow, in the slop basin. I rang again. "You've taken the wrong egg," I said. "Oh!" she exclaimed. "I thought the one I took downstairs didn't smell so very bad." In due time, she returned with the good egg. I resumed my breakfast with 2 eggs, but considerably less appetite. It was all very trivial, to be sure, but it was so stupid that I felt annoyed. The character of that egg influenced everything I did. I wrote a bad article and tore it up. I developed a bad headache. I used bad words to myself. Everything was bad. So, I abandoned my work and went for a long walk. I dined at a cheap chop house on my way back and reached home at approximately 9 o'clock. Rain was beginning to fall as I entered, and the wind was rising. It promised to be an ugly night. The alley looked dismal and dreary. The hall of the house felt as chilly as a tomb when I passed through it. It was the first stormy night I had experienced in my new quarters. The drafts were awful. They came crisscrossing through the room, meeting in the middle and forming eddies, whirlpools, and cold, silent currents that almost lifted the hair from my head. I stuffed the window frames with neckties and odd socks, then sat over the smoky fire in my greatcoat to keep warm. At first I tried to write, but it was too cold. My hand turned to ice upon the paper. What tricks the wind played with the old place? It came rushing up the forsaken alley with a sound like the feet of a hurrying crowd, stopping suddenly outside the door. I felt as though a group of curious people had arranged themselves just outside and were staring up at my windows. Then they took to their heels again, fleeing down the lane in whispers and laughter, only to return with the next gust of wind and repeat their impertinence. On the other side of my room, a single square window opened into a narrow shaft, or well, measuring approximately 6 feet across to the back wall of another house. The wind dropped down this funnel, puffing and shouting. I had never heard such noises before. Between these 2 entertainments, I sat over the fire in my greatcoat and listened to the deep booming in the chimney. It was like being aboard a ship at sea. I almost expected the floor to rise in waves and rock back and forth beneath me. October 12. I wish I were not quite so lonely and so poor, yet I love both my loneliness and my poverty. The former makes me appreciate the companionship of the wind and rain. The latter preserves my liver and prevents me from wasting time dancing attendance upon women. Poor, badly dressed men are not considered acceptable attendants. My parents are dead, and my only sister is not dead, exactly, but married to a very rich man. They travel most of the time. He travels to recover his health, while she travels to lose herself. Through sheer neglect on her part, she has long since passed out of my life. The door closed when, after an absolute silence of 5 years, she sent me a check for £50 at Christmas. It was signed by her husband. I returned it to her in 1,000 pieces, enclosed in an unstamped envelope. At least I had the satisfaction of knowing that it cost her something. She wrote back with a broad quill pen that covered an entire page with 3 lines. "You are evidently as cracked as ever, and rude and ungrateful into the bargain." It had always been my greatest fear that the insanity in my father's family might leap across the generations and appear in me. This thought haunted me, and she knew it. After this little exchange of civilities, the door slammed shut, never to open again. I heard the crash it made. With it came the sound of many little pieces of china falling from the walls of my heart. Some of it was rare china, possessing its own peculiar value. It had only needed dusting. Those same walls had once held mirrors in which I sometimes saw reflected the misty lawns of childhood, daisy chains, wind-torn blossoms scattered through the orchard by warm rain, the robber's cave along the old path, and the secret store of apples in the hayloft. My sister had been my inseparable companion then. But when the door slammed, the mirrors cracked across their entire length, and the visions they held vanished forever. Now I am quite alone. At 40, one cannot begin again and carefully construct new friendships. All others seem comparatively worthless. October 14. My bedroom measures 10 feet by 10 feet. It lies below the level of the front room, and a single step leads down into it. Both rooms are very quiet on calm nights because there is no traffic along this forsaken alleyway. Despite the occasional tricks of the wind, it is a sheltered little strip. At its upper end, beneath my windows, all the cats of the neighborhood congregate as soon as darkness gathers. They lie undisturbed upon the long ledge of a blind window in the opposite building. After the postman has come and gone at 9:30, no footsteps ever interrupt their sinister gathering. There is no step but my own, or occasionally the unsteady footfall of the son who is something on a omnibus. October 15. I dined at an ABC shop on poached eggs and coffee, then went for a stroll around the outer edge of Regent's Park. It was 10 o'clock when I returned home. I counted no fewer than 13 cats, all dark in color, crouching along the sheltered side of the alley walls. It was a cold night. The stars shone like points of ice in a blue-black sky. The cats turned their heads and stared at me in silence as I passed. An odd sensation of shyness took possession of me beneath the glare of so many pairs of unblinking eyes. As I fumbled with the latchkey, the cats jumped noiselessly down and pressed against my legs, as though anxious to be allowed inside. But I slammed the door in their faces and hurried upstairs. When I entered the front room and began groping for the matches, it felt as cold as a stone vault. The air also possessed an unusual dampness. October 17. For several days, I have been working on a ponderous article that permits no play of the imagination. My imagination requires a careful rein. I am afraid to let it loose, because it sometimes carries me into appalling places beyond the stars and beneath the world. No one understands the danger better than I do. But what a foolish thing to write here. There is no one to know, no one to understand. My mind has lately entertained unusual thoughts. They are thoughts I have never experienced before concerning medicines, drugs, and the treatment of strange illnesses. I cannot imagine their source. At no previous time in my life have I dwelt upon such ideas, yet now they constantly crowd my mind. I have taken no exercise lately because the weather has been dreadful. My afternoons have been spent in the reading room of the British Museum, where I possess a reader's ticket. I have also made an unpleasant discovery. There are rats in the house. At night, while lying in bed, I hear them scampering across the hills and valleys of the front room. My sleep has been considerably disturbed as a result. October 24. Last night, the son who is some think on a omnibus came to the house. He had evidently been drinking, because I heard loud and angry voices in the kitchen long after I had gone to bed. At one point, I caught several peculiar words rising through the floor. Burning from top to bottom is the only thing that'll ever make this house right. I knocked upon the floor, and the voices stopped abruptly. Later, however, I heard their clamor again in my dreams. These rooms are very quiet. Sometimes they are almost too quiet. On windless nights, they are as silent as the grave, and the house might be miles away in the countryside. The roar of London traffic reaches me only as a series of heavy, distant vibrations. At times, it carries an ominous note, like the approach of an army or an immense tidal wave thundering in the night from very far away. October 27. Mrs. Monson, though admirably silent, is a foolish and fussy woman. She does such stupid things. When dusting the room, she places all my belongings in the wrong locations. The ashtrays which belong on the writing table, she arranges in a silly row upon the mantelpiece. The pen tray, which should be beside the inkstand, she cleverly hides among the books upon my reading desk. My gloves she arranges every day in an idiotic display upon a half-filled bookshelf. I am always forced to return them to the low table beside the door. She places my armchair at impossible angles between the fire and the light. The tablecloth, the one stained at Trinity Hall, she puts upon the table in such a way that, whenever I look at it, I feel as though my tie and all my clothing have become crooked and disordered. She exasperates me. Her silence and meekness are irritating. Sometimes I feel inclined to throw the inkstand at her, merely to bring an expression into those watery eyes and a squeak from those colorless lips. Dear me! What violent expressions I am using! How foolish of me! And yet, it almost seems as though the words are not my own, but have been spoken directly into my ear. I mean that I do not naturally use such terms. October 30. I have been here for 1 month. I do not think the place agrees with me. My headaches are becoming more frequent and violent, and my nerves are a perpetual source of discomfort and annoyance. I have developed a great dislike for Mrs. Monson, a feeling I am certain she returns. Frequently, I receive the impression that things happen within this house of which I know nothing, and which she is careful to conceal from me. Last night, her son slept in the house. This morning, while standing at the window, I watched him leave. He glanced upward and caught my eye. I saw a loutish figure and a singularly repulsive face. He gave me the benefit of a very unpleasant leer. At least, that is what I imagined. November 2. The complete stillness of this house is beginning to oppress me. I wish there were other fellows living upstairs. No footsteps ever sound above me. No one passes my door to climb the next flight of stairs. I am beginning to feel curious about the upper rooms. I should like to go upstairs and see what they are like. I feel lonely and isolated here, as though I have been swept into a deserted corner of the world and forgotten. Once, I caught myself gazing into the long, cracked mirrors, trying to see sunlight dancing beneath the trees of the orchard, but only deep shadows gathered there now. I quickly looked away. It has been dark all day, without a breath of wind. The fogs have begun. I was forced to use a reading lamp throughout the morning. There was no cart to be heard today. I actually missed it. In the gloom and silence, I think I might almost have welcomed it. After all, the sound is a human one. This empty house at the end of the alley contains other sounds that are not quite so satisfactory. I have never once seen a policeman in the lane. The postmen always hurry away, showing no desire to linger. 10 o'clock at night. As I write, I hear no sound except the deep murmur of distant traffic and the low sighing of the wind. The two sounds blend together. Now and then, a cat raises its shrill, uncanny cry into the darkness. The cats are always beneath my windows after nightfall. The wind drops into the narrow shaft outside with a noise like the sudden sweeping of immense wings far away. It is a dreary night. I feel lost and forgotten. November 3. From my windows, I can observe anyone who arrives. When someone comes to the front door, I can just see a hat, a pair of shoulders, and a hand upon the bell. Only 2 fellows have visited me since I arrived 2 months ago. I saw both of them from the window before they came upstairs. I heard their voices asking whether I was at home. Neither of them ever returned. I have finished the ponderous article. Upon reading it through, however, I found myself dissatisfied and drew my pencil through almost every page. There were strange expressions and ideas within it that I could not explain. I viewed them with amazement, not to say alarm. They did not sound like my own thoughts, and I could not remember writing them. Can it be that my memory is beginning to fail? My pens are never where I leave them. That stupid old woman places them in a different location every day. I must give her credit for finding so many new hiding places. Such ingenuity is remarkable. I have told her repeatedly, but she always says, "I'll speak to Emily, sir." Emily always says, I'll tell Mrs. Monson, sir. Their foolishness makes me irritable and scatters my thoughts. I should like to stick the lost pens into them, blind their eyes, and turn them outside to be scratched and mauled by those 1,000 hungry cats. What a ghastly thought! Where in the world did it come from? Such an idea is no more my own than it belongs to some policeman. Yet I felt compelled to write it. It was like a voice singing inside my head, and my pen refused to stop until the final word had been written. What ridiculous nonsense! I must restrain myself. I will restrain myself. I must take more regular exercise. My nerves and liver are troubling me horribly. November 4. I attended a curious lecture in the French Quarter concerning death. The room was so hot and I was so weary that I fell asleep. The only part I heard, however, touched my imagination vividly. Speaking of suicides, the lecturer declared that self-murder provided no escape from the miseries of the present. It merely prepared greater sorrow for the future. Suicides, he said, cannot so easily escape their responsibilities. They must return to life at precisely the point where they violently abandoned it, but with the added pain and punishment caused by their weakness. Many of them wander the earth in unspeakable misery until they can clothe themselves again in the body of another person. They generally choose a lunatic or weak-minded individual who cannot resist the hideous obsession. This is their only means of escape. What a weird and horrible idea! I wish I had remained asleep and had not heard it at all. My mind is already morbid enough without such ghastly fancies. Such dangerous propaganda should be stopped by the police. I shall write to the Times and suggest it. A good idea. I walked home through Greek Street in Soho and imagined that 100 years had slipped backward into place. De Quincey was still there, haunting the night with invocations to his just, subtle, and mighty drug. His vast dreams seemed to hover nearby. Once the pictures had begun inside my brain, they refused to disappear. I saw him sleeping in that cold and tenantless mansion beside the strange little waif who feared its ghosts, both hidden beneath a single horseman's cloak. I saw him wandering in the company of the spectral Anne. Later, I saw him traveling toward the eternal meeting she was never able to keep. What unutterable gloom! What untold horror of sorrow and suffering comes over me when I try to understand what that man, who was then only a boy, must have carried inside his lonely heart. As I came up the alley, I saw a light in the highest window. The shadow of a head and shoulders appeared in exaggerated proportions upon the blind. I wondered what the landlady's son could be doing up there at such an hour. November 5. This morning, while I was writing, someone climbed the creaking stairs and knocked cautiously upon my door. Believing it to be the landlady, I called, "Come in!" The knock was repeated. I called more loudly, "Come in! Come in!" But no one turned the handle. I continued writing, muttering under my breath, "Well, stay outside then." At least, I attempted to continue. My thoughts had suddenly dried up at their source. I could not write a single word. It was a dark morning, filled with yellow fog, and there was little enough inspiration in the air already. But the thought of that stupid woman standing outside my door, waiting to be invited inside yet again, produced a feeling of irritation that filled my mind to the exclusion of everything else. At last, I jumped up and opened the door myself. "What do you want? And why in the world don't you come in?" I cried. But the words fell into empty air. There was no one there. The fog poured up the dingy staircase in deep yellow coils, but there was no sign of another human being anywhere. I slammed the door, uttering curses against the house and its noises, and returned to my work. A few minutes later, Emily entered with a letter. "Were you or Mrs. Monson outside my door a few minutes ago, knocking?" "No, sir." "Are you certain?" "Mrs. Monson has gone to market. There's no one but me and the child in the whole house. I've been washing dishes for the last hour, sir." I imagined that the girl's face became slightly paler. She moved uneasily toward the door, glancing over her shoulder. "Wait, Emily," I said. I told her what I had heard. She stared stupidly at me, although her eyes moved occasionally over the objects in the room. Who was it? I asked when I had finished. Mrs. Monson says it's only mice, she replied, as though repeating a lesson she had memorized. Mice? I exclaimed. It was nothing of the sort. Someone was feeling around outside my door. Who was it? Is the sun in the house? Her entire manner changed. She suddenly became earnest, rather than evasive. She appeared anxious to tell me the truth. Oh, no, sir. There's no one in the house but you, me, and the child. There couldn't have been anybody at your door. As for those knocks, she stopped abruptly, as though she had already said too much. Well, what about the knocks? I asked more gently. Of course, she stammered. The knocks aren't mice, and neither are the footsteps. But then, again, she stopped completely. Is there something wrong with the house? Lord, no, sir. The drains are splendid. I don't mean the drains, girl. I mean, did anything bad ever happen here? She flushed to the roots of her hair, then suddenly turned pale again. She was clearly in considerable distress. There was something she wanted to tell me, yet was afraid to reveal. Some forbidden matter she had been ordered not to mention. I do not mind what it was, I said encouragingly. I should simply like to know. She raised her frightened eyes to my face. She began to blurt out something concerning that which happened once to a gentleman who lived upstairs. Then a shrill voice called her name from below. Emily! Emily! It was the returning landlady. The girl tumbled downstairs as though an invisible rope had pulled her backward. She left me filled with questions about what could possibly have happened to a gentleman upstairs that might, in so peculiar a manner, affect my ears downstairs. The mystery has only just begun. An empty house, strange noises, a frightened servant, and a secret that no one seems willing to speak aloud. In part 2, the writer's unease deepens as the house reveals more of its unsettling nature, leading him closer to the truth hidden above his rooms. Until next time, sleep well, and if you hear footsteps in an empty hallway, perhaps don't answer the door.